The music in the ballroom did not stop when Cade and Becky tore the lanyard from his wife's neck. But every voice inside the room did. Waiters froze with silver trays in their hands. Investors paused in the middle of polite laughter. The photographers at the back lowered their cameras one by one as the badge snapped, fell, and slid across the marble floor like something dead. Cade did not even look ashamed. He held the broken card between two fingers, smiled at the board members surrounding him, and said in a voice loud enough for the staff, the guests, and the woman beside him in red silk to hear, "You're done, Amara. You do not belong in my hotel anymore." The woman in red gave a small laugh. His mother lifted her chin with satisfaction, and the wife he had just tried to erase looked down at the badge by her shoes, then back at him, with a silence so calm it felt more dangerous than shouting. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Because tonight's story is about pride, betrayal, hidden power, and the one woman everybody underestimated until it was far too late. And trust me, by the end of this story, the same man who humiliated his wife in front of a room full of wealthy people would be begging for one thing he could never get back. Amara did not argue with Cade in that ballroom. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask the guests to stay out of her marriage. She did not beg the staff to remember how many nights she had worked beside them while he slept in penthouse suites and spoke about leadership from behind glass doors. She simply bent down, picked up her broken badge, smoothed her navy blazer, and looked at him the way people look at storms just before they pass. There was something in that look Cade should have feared. But arrogance has a way of making a man blind exactly when he needs sight the most. "Security," he said, almost lazily, wanting to enjoy the theater of it. But Amara was already walking toward the exit on her own. She passed the concierge desk she had once helped redesign by hand. She passed the flower display she had paid to replace after a supplier failed. She passed junior staff who had come to her in tears when payroll was late, uniforms were missing, or a guest had spoken to them like they were invisible. She did not cry. And because she did not cry, everyone who watched her leave felt more uncomfortable than they would have if she had collapsed. In her handbag was an envelope she had carried for nearly 3 years and never opened. It was thick cream paper, slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed with dark wax that had cracked but never broken. On the front, in her father's handwriting, were 6 words she knew by heart because she had read them so many times without ever obeying them. "When they show you who they are, open this then." Her father had pressed that envelope into her hand in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic, old grief, and a goodbye nobody wanted to say aloud. She had promised him she would keep it safe. She had not promised she would be brave enough to read it. Outside, the city lights reflected on the polished hood of black luxury cars lined up beneath the hotel entrance. Inside, the ballroom announcement had already moved on, because rich people are experts at swallowing other people's pain with dessert and applause. But under the porte-cochere, with the cool night air brushing against her face, Amara finally broke the seal. Inside the envelope were only 3 things: a folded letter, a small brass key, and a name written on a single cream card. Mr. Temba Ndlovu. Call him before sunrise. She stared at the card for a long time. Temba had been her father's oldest friend, a quiet man with patient eyes and a voice that made even bad news sound measured. She had not seen him since the funeral. The letter was short. "Your husband will try to make you believe your life became small because I left you little. He is wrong. I built what needed to be hidden. I protected what needed to survive greed. When the time comes, the key will open more than a box. Trust Temba. trust yourself. And remember, ownership is not always the name on the sign. Sometimes it is the name missing from it. To understand why those words mattered, you have to go back to when Amara still believed love and loyalty moved in the same direction. Long before Cade wore tailored suits and called himself the face of Mbeki Royal, Amara was the one everybody in the city knew would build something extraordinary. She had studied hospitality design and business management with the kind of restless intelligence that made lecturers remember her years later. She understood spaces the way musicians understand rhythm. She could walk into a tired restaurant, a broken guest wing, or a neglected lobby and see exactly what it could become. But when her mother died and her father's health began to fail, she came home before graduating overseas. She told everyone it was temporary. It became a different life. Her father, Elias Ndlovu, had founded some of the most profitable hospitality assets on the coast, but he never liked public attention. He believed titles attracted liars faster than truth. So he built through holding companies, quiet partnerships, and long-term trusts. He spent money where it mattered and hid his name where vanity usually stamped itself. That irritated people like Cade, who thought power had to be visible to be real. Back then, Cade was not a hotel owner. He was a hungry operations manager with a sharp haircut, a warm smile, and a talent for making ambition look like devotion. He met Amara in one of the older properties after a supplier dispute had left the kitchen in chaos. She rolled up her sleeves and fixed 3 problems before he finished introducing himself. He stared at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. At least, that is how he wanted her to remember it. He courted her beautifully in those early days. Flowers sent without drama. Late-night drives along the coast. Soft promises about building something meaningful together. He told her he admired that she knew how every part of a business worked, from linen stock to guest retention. He told her she made him better. He told her he did not need her father's money, only her heart. The dangerous thing about men like Cade is not that they lie badly. It is that they study what truth sounds like and wear it like cologne. By the time Amara married him, she had already stepped away from a life that might have made her independently famous. She told herself that sacrifice did not mean loss if it was made for family, for love, for a shared future. She believed building beside a man counted the same as building for herself. She would learn later that the world does not always reward women for believing in joint dreams. When Elias grew weaker, Cade became more useful. He sat by the old man's bed. He discussed expansion plans. He spoke in low, respectful tones about preserving the family legacy. But there were moments Amara remembers differently now. The way her father watched Cade when Cade thought nobody noticed. The way Elias always asked Amara to review every document herself. The way he once told her, "Never confuse access with loyalty." At the time, she thought he was speaking generally, the way older people do when they have seen enough human weakness to stop being surprised by it. She did not know he had already seen something in Cade that love had hidden from her. After the funeral, things changed slowly enough to feel accidental. Cade took on more visible leadership. Amara, grieving and exhausted, moved into operational support because it seemed practical. If he led the big strategy meetings, she would hold together the parts of the business that could not appear in glossy annual reports. Staff housing, training, kitchen procurement, guest recovery, uniforms, transport problems, maintenance crises, payroll complaints. She became the invisible backbone of the company, while he became the polished face. The board loved his confidence. Investors loved his certainty. Magazines loved the photographs. And because her father's structures were quiet, Because the real ownership did not sit in giant letters on the hotel facade, people began to assume what Cade wanted them to assume: that he had married into a decent family, worked hard, and earned his rise on brilliance alone. His mother helped that story grow. Miriam Mbeki had the smile of a woman who preferred humiliation to honesty. Every Sunday she came to dinner and found a fresh way to reduce Amara. "My son was born for boardrooms," she would say while accepting food Amara cooked. "Some women are simply better in support roles." Or, "It's such a blessing that Cade has your father's old contacts now. Men carry legacy differently." Amara would pour tea, clear plates, and stay quiet. Not because she lacked words, but because she still believed silence protected peace. She did not understand yet that some people treat silence as permission. Then came Zina. Officially, Zina Afolayan was the new brand director, brought in to modernize the public image of the luxury properties under Cade's leadership. Unofficially, she was always where Cade was: in launch photos, late strategy dinners, airport posts, mirror reflections in captions that pretended not to mention him while making sure everyone noticed. She was clever, gorgeous, and sharp enough to make women underestimate her only once. Amara did not explode when she first noticed. She watched. She listened. She saw how Cade defended Zina before anyone accused her of anything. She saw how his phone tilted away when messages arrived. She saw how he started saying "we" when discussing plans Amara had not even been told about. Infidelity does not always begin with a kiss. Sometimes it begins with replacing one person's knowledge with another person's access. The public firing did not happen because of an affair, though the affair made it easier. It happened because Amara asked one question in the wrong meeting. There had been rumors for weeks that Cade wanted to sell the old harbor wing of their flagship luxury hotel to a foreign entertainment group. On paper, it sounded brilliant. Redevelopment, private villas, elite gaming lounges, yacht access, international buzz. But the harbor wing sat on land tied to a community trust her father had protected for decades. There was a women's craft market behind it, a staff housing block nearby, a small learning center funded quietly through one of Elias's side charities. Amara asked for the land documents. Cade told her she was emotional. She asked again. He told her she did not understand high-value finance. She asked the legal team directly. 2 days later, she was publicly accused of interfering with executive decisions and damaging investor confidence. Cade chose the launch gala to make an example of her, because humiliation is most satisfying to people who are losing control and want to hide it as authority. When she called Temba before sunrise, he answered on the second ring, as if he had been awake and waiting for years. He did not waste her time with pity. "Come to my office before anyone from the hotel sees you," he said. "Bring the key, bring the letter, bring every instinct you have ignored to keep your marriage alive." His office sat above an old law library that smelled of paper, polished wood, and patient secrets. He looked older than she remembered, but not weaker. He read the letter without surprise, turned the brass key over in his hand, and unlocked a dark mahogany box from a cabinet behind his desk. Inside were files, stamped deeds, share certificates, trustee instructions, and a document that changed the oxygen in the room. "Your father did not leave the flagship hotel to Cade," Temba said. "He did not even leave it to the company Cade runs. He placed controlling land rights, voting protections, and the master lease authority under the Ndlovu Legacy Trust. When he died, those rights remained dormant until a triggering event proved the appointed successor needed active control. You are that successor, Amara." The trigger was betrayal combined with attempted dispossession. In plain language, the moment your husband tried to strip you of status and remove you from the enterprise while seeking transfer power through deception, control shifted to you fully. Amara laughed once, not from joy, but from disbelief so sharp it almost hurt. "You're telling me the hotel he just threw me out of does not belong to him?" Temba's expression did not change. "I'm telling you the land beneath the flagship, the renewal rights on the luxury licenses, the harbor development approvals, and the voting lock on the parent trust all now require your authorization." She stared at him. "Does Cade know?" "He knows enough to be dangerous," Temba said. "He has spent months trying to locate authority he thought your father left unsecured. He never imagined Elias would hide it in the person he considered easiest to control." That was the first blow Cade did not know had already landed. The second came before noon. Temba's forensic accountant found 2 lines of credit opened in Amara's name using identity documents she had not authorized. The addresses tied to them were a private office Cade used and an apartment Zena had leased through a shell agency. Expensive jewelry, foreign travel, political entertainment bills, luxury purchases, not random theft. Narrative building. "He was shaping a file," Temba said. "Debt in your name, emotional instability in internal emails, removal from operations, then likely divorce and claims that you were reckless or unfit." Amara felt cold. "Unfit for what?" Temba looked at her carefully. "For anything he wanted to take from you. Reputation first, then assets, then your daughter." Little Sade was 7 years old and still slept with one hand tucked under her cheek the way she had as a baby. When Amara picked her up from school that afternoon, she said nothing about the ballroom. Children know when adults are performing calm, but they accept it when love is steady. Sade asked why they were going to Auntie Lindiwe's guest house instead of home. Amara kissed her forehead and said they were having a small adventure. That night, after Sade fell asleep, Amara sat by the window with the city glowing below and read every page Temba had copied for her. The more she read, the more a shape emerged. Cade had not merely been cheating. He had been accelerating toward a financial event. The foreign entertainment group needed the harbor wing. The lenders needed proof of unrestricted control. The board needed to approve a redevelopment package. And somewhere in the middle of that chain, he had tried to erase the one person whose signature could stop all of it. The next morning delivered another piece. An old accounts clerk named Mama Bisi, who had worked under Elias long before Cade arrived, asked to meet Amara in a church courtyard instead of at the hotel. She came carrying a grocery bag full of printed spreadsheets, handwritten notes, and copied internal memos. "Your father used to say no company dies from greed alone," she said. "It dies when good people decide they are too small to speak." She spread the pages out on the bench between them. Staff pension contributions delayed and redirected. Housekeeping budgets slashed while executive entertainment costs grew. Supplier invoices duplicated through a consulting company that linked back to Zena's brother. Overtime manipulation in the staff housing accounts. And one red-circled document with a forged internal authorization stamp that used Elias Nedlovu's signature mark, even though the man had been dead for almost 3 years. "I kept these because I knew one day you would ask the right question," Mama Bisi said. "Your father built work here. Your husband built theater." Amara did not storm the building with the evidence. That is what Cade expected of wounded people. Instead, she became quieter. She let him keep believing she was broken. She let gossip travel without correcting it. When Zena posted a carefully staged photo from Amara's former house office, showing the family portraits removed from the wall with a caption about clearing space for the future, Amara saved it and sent it to Temba without comment. When Cade's lawyer filed urgent divorce papers, accusing her of financial irresponsibility, emotional volatility, and abandonment of the marital home, she did not respond publicly. When the papers included an application for temporary primary custody of Sade based on an unstable domestic environment, Amara closed the file, breathed once, and finally cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for her body to release the grief that pride had trapped behind her ribs. Temba came that evening with tea, patience, and something else. "There is a founder's night in 4 days," he said. "Cade believes it will celebrate his redevelopment announcement. He pushed the date because he thinks speed will outrun scrutiny. What he does not know is that the parent trust requires annual confirmation of controlling authority before any major land transfer. And this year, the review can no longer remain ceremonial." Amara looked up slowly. "In front of the board?" "In front of the board, the lenders, selected investors, selected press, and everyone he invited to watch himself become untouchable." She understood then. Her father had not only hidden power, he had timed its protection to reveal character at the moment greed overreached. "If I stop the deal," she asked quietly, "what happens to him?" Temba did not smile. "That depends on how much he forged, how many lied for him, and whether he is foolish enough to keep speaking." He was. Men in control rarely stop talking until the room belongs to someone else. 2 nights before Founders Night, Cade called Amara for the first time since the public firing. His voice was smooth, almost bored, the way people sound when they think damage has already done its work. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "Sign the exit papers. Take a settlement. Don't embarrass yourself in front of the board. They've moved on." Amara let the silence stretch. "Have they?" she asked. He laughed softly. "You always mistake sentiment for leverage. This is business. You were useful in support. That does not make you central." She almost told him then that central was exactly what her father had made her. Instead, she said, "And Sade? If you behave sensibly, the custody issue can remain civil." There it was. Not fatherhood, strategy. Not concern, pressure. She ended the call and sent the recording to Temba. The next surprise came from Zena, and it nearly changed everything. She asked to meet Amara in a rooftop cafe far from the hotel district. She arrived alone, dressed in cream linen, sunglasses hiding half her face until she took them off and revealed not guilt, but calculation. "I know you know about the accounts," she said without greeting. "I also know Cade used my connections for investor access. That does not mean I am stupid enough to drown with him." Amara said nothing. Zena leaned forward. "He promised me equity he could not legally secure. He told me you were ceremonial, replaceable, a grieving wife who did not read documents. If you want him finished, I have messages, voice notes, and a draft proposal showing he planned to shift the harbor rights before board confirmation." "Why help me?" Amara asked. Zena held her gaze. "Because I back winners. And because men like Cade always think they are the only ones allowed to use people." It was not a confession. It was an offer from one predator to someone she hoped had become another.
Amara took the files, but trusted the woman not at all. By the morning of Founders' Night, the city had already chosen its story. Society pages described Cade as the modernizer of a legacy luxury brand. Staff rumor painted Amara as emotionally overwhelmed, unable to handle corporate pressure. Miriam had reportedly told half her friends that her son had married beneath his discipline and paid for it with his peace. But stories are fragile when they depend on documents that cannot survive daylight. Temba assembled the evidence in layers. Trust documents first, land control rights second, the attempted debt framing third, the pension diversions fourth, the forged authorizations fifth, Zena's messages sixth, and last, a letter from Elias himself to the board chair, sealed until succession activation, explaining why he had structured the properties the way he did. Your father wanted the moral center of the empire protected from vanity, Temba said. Tonight the people who laughed at his methods will understand them. When Amara entered the Founders' Night ballroom, almost nobody recognized her immediately.
She wore deep black with gold trim so subtle, it looked expensive only to people who understood fabric. Her hair was swept back. Her jewelry was minimal. She carried no anger on her face, which made her presence more commanding than fury ever could. The same ballroom that had watched her humiliation days earlier now hummed with the false confidence of people certain they were attending a coronation. Cade stood near the stage in a midnight tuxedo, one hand resting too casually at the small of Zena's back. Miriam wore emerald satin and a smile sharpened by anticipated victory. Around them clustered lenders, influencers, politicians, hospitality partners, and the sort of guests who clap hardest when they think power is choosing itself. Amara did not approach Cade first. She took a seat at the front beside Temba and the board chair, an older woman named Dr. Njeri Adebayo, whose intelligence made most men speak too much in her presence. Cade saw the seating arrangement from across the room and frowned for just a second. Not fear yet, only disruption. He recovered quickly and gave the room his practiced smile. Speeches began. The tribute montage played. A jazz trio covered the edge of tension with elegance. Then Cade took the microphone and started talking about renewal, bold growth, premium transformation, and the future of African luxury on the global stage. He spoke well. He always had. That is the danger of polished men. They can make theft sound visionary if nobody interrupts with paper. He was halfway through describing the harbor redevelopment as the final step in fully unlocking our long-protected coastal asset when Dr. Adebayo rose from her seat. Before redevelopment matters proceed, she said, her voice clean and calm through the sound system, the board will fulfill the trust's annual succession confirmation and controlling authority review as required under the Ndlovu Legacy Charter. Some guests shifted in confusion. Cade smiled tightly. Of course, he said, still performing ease. A formality. Dr. Adebayo did not return the smile. Not this year. The ballroom changed temperature. That is the only way to describe it. Something invisible moved through the room, and even the waiters seemed to sense it. Dr. Adebayo opened a dark folder and continued. Following the verified triggering event provisions under Section 9 of the Charter, controlling authority over the land, master lease approvals, and protected asset voting rights has now vested fully in the designated successor. She paused. That successor is Ms. Amara Ndlovu Mbeki. For one full second, nobody breathed. Cade stared as if the language itself had become impossible. Then every head in the room turned toward Amara. She stood slowly. No rush. No shaking hands. No triumphant smirk. She crossed the distance to the stage with the kind of stillness that makes noise feel cheap. When she reached the microphone, she looked first at the staff at the back of the room, not the rich guests in front. "A few nights ago," she said, "my husband tore my badge from my neck and told me I did not belong in this hotel." The words landed harder because the entire room remembered them. He was wrong. She let that breathe. This hotel's public name may have changed hands many times. Its advertising may have changed. Its management may have changed. But the land beneath it, the rights that protect it, and the charter that governs its soul were secured by my father long before some of you learned its address. Those rights are now mine to exercise. So let me be clear. The harbor redevelopment does not proceed. The protected land is not for sale. The staff housing is not for demolition. The learning center will not be removed. And no one who built this company from the inside out will be discarded to finance someone else's vanity. Miriam's face lost color so quickly it looked almost theatrical. Cade stepped forward. "This is absurd," he snapped, forgetting the camera phones pointed at him from 3 directions. "She has no executive authority over current operating actions." Dr. Adebayo replied before Amara needed to. "Operational leadership does not supersede trust control where restricted assets are concerned." Temba placed 3 certified documents on the lectern. "Nor does fraud." The word hit harder than any shout could have. Gasps rippled across the tables. Cade's jaw tightened. "Be careful," he said. Temba opened the first file. Unauthorized credit structures opened in Ms. Amara's name. The second. Forged internal authorizations referencing a deceased founder's signature mark. The third. Pension diversions and vendor payment transfers routed through related party entities. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Facts spoken without panic are a special kind of violence against lies. Cade turned to Zena as if expecting reinforcement, but self-interest has no marriage vows. She took 1 step back from him, then another. "I have submitted my communications archive to counsel," she said into the sudden silence, "including messages in which Mr. Mbeki discussed bypassing trust confirmation and controlling optics around his wife's removal." A murmur tore through the room. Cade looked at her the way drowning people look at shorelines moving farther away. "You knew," he said. Zena's expression did not soften. "You assumed everyone in your life was less ambitious than you. That was your mistake." What happened next was not dramatic in the cinematic way movies like to lie about. No one threw a glass. No one fainted into diamonds. Real power reversals are often quieter and more devastating. The lead lender's counsel whispered to his client. 2 board members rose and moved away from Cade physically, as if proximity itself had become dangerous. A compliance officer from the back approached Dr. Adebayo with a sealed envelope. Security, who had once escorted staff out under Cade's orders, now stood near the stage waiting for instruction. Cade saw it all happen in real time, the room detaching from him piece by piece. Then Amara delivered the line that finished what his own pride had started. "You did not fail because you aimed too high," she said, looking directly at him. "You failed because you believed ownership belonged to the loudest man in the room. My father built this company to survive men exactly like you." She could have humiliated him more. She had every reason. But she did something worse. She told the truth without heat. People can argue with rage. They struggle to survive calm certainty. Security requested Cade's access card. For a heartbeat, he did not move. It must have felt familiar in the worst possible way, the memory of a badge breaking under his own hand only days earlier. Slowly, visibly, in front of board members, lenders, staff, guests, cameras, and his mother, He unclipped the executive card from his jacket and surrendered it. His phone vibrated almost instantly. Corporate access disabled. Payment authorizations suspended. Executive credentials revoked pending investigation. He looked down at the screen like a man reading the first honest sentence of his adult life. And because arrogance always tries one last weapon, he said the one thing that made half the women in the room turn cold. "You think this wins you everything?" he asked Amara. "There is still family court. There is still custody." The silence after that was different. No longer shocked. Disgusted. Temba stepped forward one final time. "Thank you for raising that yourself," he said. "The court has already been notified of the fraudulent debt narrative, the timing of the public dismissal, and the strategic nature of the custody filing. Additionally, the marriage agreement you signed when promoted to chief executive includes a reputational misconduct clause tied to coercive actions against the founder's line and any minor child used as leverage in asset disputes. In simpler terms, Mr. Mbeki, if you weaponize the child to force financial advantage, you forfeit your executive severance, your residence claim, and any deferred equity benefits tied to the trust structure you never properly read." Cade sat down because his knees chose the truth before his mouth did. The applause did not begin immediately. That made it real. People were not clapping for spectacle. They were processing shame. Staff who had watched and said nothing. Executives who had benefited from not asking questions. Socialites who had laughed when a wife was publicly diminished because they thought wealth made cruelty elegant. Then, from the far side of the room, one elderly housekeeper who had worked with Amara since the old Harbor Wing days began to clap. Once. Twice. A waiter joined her. Then a pastry chef. Then a line of front desk staff. And suddenly, the sound moved through the ballroom not as celebration, but as correction. By the time the applause reached the wealthy tables at the front, it no longer belonged to them. Amara did not soak it in. She did not bow. She did not take revenge selfies with her husband's collapse. She stepped away from the microphone and walked first to the staff section. "Thank you for staying," she told them. "Tomorrow, we rebuild properly." One young receptionist started crying. Another laughed through tears. A porter who had once been threatened for speaking up about unsafe overnight shifts said, "Welcome back, ma'am." Amara shook her head gently. "No, not back. Forward." It was the kind of line people remember not because it is clever, but because it arrives when fear finally breaks. Miriam approached her later, after most guests had found the exits and most phones had found the internet. For the first time since Amara had known her, the older woman looked small. Not poor, not weak, just stripped of performance. "I misjudged you," Miriam said. "No," Amara replied quietly. "You judged me exactly the way you judge everyone who serves before they are seen." Miriam opened her mouth, then closed it. There are moments when apology arrives too late to become healing and only manages to become evidence of self-awareness. Amara offered her no cruelty, only distance. The next morning, the city woke up to a different story, not the one Cade had paid for, not the one gossip had rehearsed. The lenders froze the redevelopment package. Regulators requested internal records. The board announced a temporary restructuring under trust supervision. Social media clips of the badge reversal spread everywhere, but the image people kept returning to was not Cade's collapse. It was Amara standing still, while everyone else realized they had mistaken visibility for value. That Monday, when she walked through the hotel's glass entrance in a tailored cream suit, the lobby actually fell silent for a second before the applause began. This time it came fast. Bell staff, concierge team, kitchen runners, Housekeepers in pressed uniforms. Even guests waiting to check out looked up from their phones and joined without fully understanding. Respect moves faster than rumor when people have been waiting for permission to show it. Her first act was not revenge, it was payroll correction. Delayed overtime was settled. Pension shortfalls were covered from Emergency Reserve Authority, now accessible under the trust. The staff housing demolition order was withdrawn. The learning center behind the harbor wing reopened with new computers and evening classes for workers' children. The women's craft market received a 5-year protection guarantee written directly into the harbor preservation plan. Luxury, Amara announced in her first internal address, would no longer be measured by how invisible labor could be made to look. It would be measured by whether the people creating excellence could afford dignity in return. That speech was not as flashy as Cade's launch presentations, but staff listened with a concentration no rebrand campaign can purchase. The investigation widened in ways Cade had never predicted. Some people who had helped him out of fear came forward early and received protection. Others lied until email trails pinned them to tables they thought would never overturn. Xena cooperated because survival, not virtue, remained her religion. Yet even her testimony revealed something useful. Cade had spent years crafting a public image strong enough to hide the fact that he did not understand the deeper architecture beneath the company he bragged about controlling. He knew the chandeliers, the investor decks, the ribbon cuttings, the magazine covers. He did not know the old lease clauses, the labor side letters, the founder protections, or the quiet promises Elias had written into places nobody vain enough to chase applause would bother reading. In the end, Cade was not destroyed by one hidden will. He was destroyed by his belief that only visible power matters. Weeks later, Amara went alone to the old harbor wing at sunset. It was quieter there than the main tower, full of older stone, salt air, and echoes of the company before it became a stage for executives. She carried the brass key in her palm. Beneath the grand staircase was a small, locked oak cabinet Elias had once told her never to worry about. The key fit perfectly. Inside were guest books, old photographs, land maps, handwritten letters from staff who had started as cleaners and retired as managers. And one last note from her father. If you are reading this, it means you were forced to remember who you are. I am sorry for the pain, but not for the structure. Buildings are easy to steal. Meaning is harder. Protect the people. Protect the coast. Protect the dignity of work. And choose a life where no one must disappear for love. That was the sentence that finally broke something open inside her. Not in a painful way, in a freeing one. For years she had thought being needed was the same as being valued. She had mistaken endurance for partnership, sacrifice for investment, silence for maturity. Sitting there on the floor with the old note in her hands, she understood that love without respect is only appetite in formal clothes. She also understood something else. Her father had never doubted her capacity. She had doubted it for both of them. The divorce moved quickly after the evidence surfaced. Cade's legal aggression shrank once it became clear the custody narrative would fail under scrutiny and possibly worsen his exposure. Sade remained with Amara in the family residence, held separately under the trust. The court required supervised visitation until financial and misconduct matters were resolved. Cade hated that more than losing the ballroom. Men like him can survive public disgrace if they still believe private control remains possible. What broke him was discovering that every lever he thought he could pull had been locked by foresight, patience, and a woman he considered too gentle to be dangerous. Amara did not become loud after winning. She became visible on her own terms. She completed the degree she once abandoned, this time through a tailored executive restoration program while continuing to oversee the hotels. She converted one penthouse floor in the flagship property into a leadership academy for internal staff training. Housekeepers could become floor supervisors. Porters could study logistics. Front desk clerks could train in revenue systems. Kitchen apprentices could move into supplier management. Legacy, she told the first intake class, is not when one family keeps power. It is when a system stops treating talent like decoration. As for the flagship hotel, it remained luxurious, but different. The harbor wing was restored rather than sold. Local art replaced imported imitation prestige. Menus featured regional producers once pushed aside for glossy partnerships. Staff names appeared in internal recognition walls, with stories about their years of contribution. A scholarship in Elias Ndlovu's name funded education for children of hotel workers. And in the lobby, where Cade had once ripped a badge from Amara's neck, a new installation stood beneath soft lighting. An antique brass key mounted beside a small plaque. Some doors are not opened by force. They are opened by truth. People still ask why Amara did not humiliate Cade more once she could. Why she did not drag him through every room, expose every private failing, and take pleasure in every ruined relationship. The answer is simple. Small people confuse revenge with restoration. Amara wanted restoration. She wanted her child safe. She wanted the workers protected. She wanted the land preserved. She wanted the company cleaned without becoming cruel enough to resemble the man who almost poisoned it. That is why her victory lasted beyond one dramatic night. It was not built on his collapse. It was built on her clarity. And if there is one final lesson in all this, it is this. Never assume the quiet person has no power. Sometimes, the person speaking least is the one carrying the contract everybody else forgot to read. Sometimes the woman being mocked at the side of the room is the one holding the keys to the entire building. Sometimes the badge torn from someone's chest is the exact moment a lie loses its final chance to survive. Cade believed ownership meant cameras, applause, and authority performed in expensive rooms. Amara proved that real ownership is responsibility, memory, protection, and the courage to act when everyone else has already chosen the easier lie. So the next time you see someone being underestimated because they are calm, because they serve, because they do not advertise what they carry, remember this story. The loudest person in the room is not always the strongest. The most decorated person in the building is not always the one who built it. And the one forced to walk out in silence may be the same one who returns with the power to rewrite everyone's future. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe for more unforgettable stories, and tell me in the comments, at what exact moment do you think Cade realized he had destroyed himself?